Hey guys, welcome back to Hook with Anime. If you like the video, make sure to subscribe to my channel. Let's begin. The Second Son of God, Chapter 1. Kuo Academy was a seemingly ordinary school located in the midst of an ordinary town, but not everything was the way it seemed. In the recently turned co-ed school, shadowy figures and hidden activities were out and about, and the main student body was none the smarter. In the normal teenagers' eyes, their school was as ordinary as they came. Just a learning facility filled with hormonal teenage boys trying to get into the girls' pants, and that saved them a lot less headaches. But even in the normal student body, there was one individual who appeared to be a loner, but a silent hero in his own right. Uzumaki Naruto had enrolled in the Kuo Academy since it first started to grant male students admission, and since then he had appeared to be one of the more mysterious people of the school. No one had ever seen him talk or associate with other students. Whenever he was in school, he would stay away from others and silently studied his courses at the back of classrooms. The young blonde man was not ugly or repulsive or anything, far from it in fact. Many girls in the school considered Naruto to be a very handsome man that they wouldn't mind discovering on their own, but even when beautiful girls approached him, Naruto just ignore or walk away from them. But his bad boy and isolationist attitude kept him on the radar of many female students of the school, and he grew to be one of the most popular boys, much to his own annoyance. It did not help Naruto that he was also the top-ranked student in the school, having achieved top marks in every single subject, which made many of his male classmates jealous of him. But there was a side to Uzumaki Naruto that none of his classmates knew about. Class took longer than usual today, thought Naruto as he ran down the street in the midst of the busy downtown area of his town. I hope they are all okay. The blonde teenager was dressed in his usual school uniform, which consisted of a black blazer with white accents, a white, long-sleeved dress shirt with a black ribbon on the collar, matching black pants, and brown dress shoes. It was obvious that Naruto's uniform had seen better days, but he couldn't care less about it at the moment, and continued his sprint down the road. Naruto finally made it to his destination, which was a large open area under a freeway overpass. It was a common area for countless homeless people to settle at nights, and it had become one of Naruto's most frequented places. Since he could remember, Naruto could always look at a person, and see what kind of body he or she had. It was as if someone had planted the blueprint of every single human being into his brain, and he could point out exactly where people had injuries of diseases. The young man didn't need X-rays or CT scans to see what was going on in one's body. Somehow his mind would already know what was wrong, his eyes could pinpoint exactly where, and he could operate on their bodies in order to heal them of their sickness. Naruto once cured a homeless man of appendicitis using nothing more than a steak knife and some sleeping pills. His incisions were accurate to the point where a doctor could scan the man's body and find that he had just gone under surgery operated by a very skilled surgeon. Ever since Naruto found that his powers could help so many people who could afford medical insurance or healthcare, he decided to go down to the overpass every day to treat people who need his help. The blonde had been visiting many homeless populations for a year already, and he was beginning to feel that he could make a difference by healing one man at a time. "Oh!" cried a middle-aged woman as she cradled a little boy to her chest. "Thank God you are here, Naruto-san." Naruto quickly ran over to his desk, which was one he picked up in some random landfill and was still intact. "Please, bring the boy over here." The woman ran over to the desk and placed her son on it as tears pooled in her eyes. It was obvious to others that the woman was homeless, and she had no way to get her son medical attention right away, so she brought him to their local hero. Fortunately for the woman, the overpass was not crowded with people like usual, and the few other patients agreed to let her son see Naruto first since they were not having any serious troubles. "Please, can you save him?" cried the woman as she knelt down next to the desk in anguish. Naruto gave the woman a kind smile and patted her on the shoulder. "Ma'am, I promise that I will do everything I can to save your son." The blonde's words seemed to have an effect, seeing that the woman calmed down slightly and allowed the young doctor to diagnose his patient quietly. Naruto's eyes scanned over the boy's frail body as his hands pressed on various places to check on his organs. In his mind, Naruto already knew what was wrong with the boy. He had pneumonia, but thankfully it was not very severe. The boy just started to have his fever, and was having trouble coughing, which were symptoms that matched up with Naruto's mental answer. "Don't worry, ma'am," said Naruto as he pulled a box out of his backpack. "Your son will be fine. Thankfully you brought him here quickly and his pneumonia can still be suppressed by using antibiotics." Naruto drew a syringe full of some antibiotics he managed to steal from a local pharmacy, and injected it into the boy. Stay here for the next few hours with him and let me monitor him, but if nothing goes wrong his symptoms should be retracting soon. Naruto handed the woman a piece of paper. This piece of paper lists out the times I will be in this location for the next 2 weeks, and if your son still have problems please bring him back to me. The woman cried as she hugged her son close to her chest. Thank you so much, choked out the woman in between quick breathes. God bless you, Naruto-san. Naruto just smiled back and shook his head. I make it my responsibility that everyone gets the chance to be treated, you don't have to thank me. The woman gave Naruto a deep bow and wiped away her tears. You are a saint, she said with a smile. The blonde chuckled and started to settle his things down on his desk. I'm just a student, ma'am, and regrettably, I'm not a very religious person. The happy mother shook her head. You have a gift, Naruto-san, and I am sure that God is watching all you are doing. The woman smiled and gave Naruto another bow. You saved many people in these past months. He must be proud. With that the woman stepped back and rested down on a bench along with her sleeping son, hoping that the medications would really help her son. Naruto smiled as he gestured his next patient to come forward. God? Thought the young man silently. Faith is a gift that I have yet to receive. After another 6 hours at the overpass, Naruto finally packed up his things and was heading back home. It was not as busy as usual. Naruto only had to treat about 10 patients, but he stayed the full time because he wanted to see if that boy needed any more injections. Fortunately, the boy's condition was getting better and better, and Naruto told the mother that her son should be fine. The overpass Naruto just visited was quite far from his home, and it took him an hour by train to get back to his neighborhood. Naruto was an orphan who was abandoned in Japan when he was very young. His birth parents had died while on a business trip to Japan, and he was left inside an orphanage that took in foreign children until his current parents adopted him into their family. Naruto's blonde hair really stood out in Japan, and many people would wonder where he originated from. But even Naruto didn't know who his birth parents were or where they were from, but he assumed that it was somewhere in Europe. Although it seemed that Naruto was not entirely European, as doctors told his parents that he was half European descent, and half Asian descent, indicating that one of his parents might have been Japanese. At the age of 17, Naruto was taller than others in his classes at the height of 6 feet, and his body was much more built than other boys his age. Because of his power to see the makings of each individual human being, Naruto analyzed his own body and figured out ways to hone it to its maximum physical potential. After countless hours in his father's weight room, Naruto had toned his muscles to perfection, and if he ever took his clothes off in front of his fangirls at school he would be even busier with them. I'm home, announced the young man happily as he took his shoes off and placed them on the rack. A middle-aged woman with brown hair and red eyes walked up to him. Welcome home, sweetie. What took you so long today? This woman was Uzumaki Kurenai, the adopted mother of Naruto and a housewife who took care of her family with love. Naruto grinned and kissed his mother on the cheek. Sorry Ka-san, but I had to study at school, there is a big test soon. Naruto's parents had no idea that he had been helping the homeless or the fact that he had been stealing from many medical facilities for the past year. Since Naruto's academy records and scores were so good, he used them as a valid excuse for after-school studies. The Uzumaki parents knew that their son was smart, but had no idea that he could ace every single subject at school without actually studying for more than an hour. Don't worry about the boy so much, honey, said a low voice from the kitchen as the mother and son walked in. He's 17 already. Maybe he went on some dates and decided to keep it from us. This was Uzumaki Asuma, the adopted father of Naruto. Asuma was an engineer who worked in a local construction company, and was a chain smoker who would stink up the house with his cigarettes. Asuma had a thick layer of black hair and a beard that his wife considered manly and cool. Naruto smiled at his father as his mother sighed. Naruto, I told you before, no dating before you make it into university. Asuma sighed at his wife and shook his head. Come on honey, the boy is already 17, don't you think it is time that he gets some experience with girls? Kurenai have her husband a hard look and placed her hands on her hips. No dear, exclaimed the woman loudly. If he slacks off now then he might not make it into one of the good universities. Kurenai looked back at her son seriously. I will not have some little girl steal my little boy's future away. Naruto sighed but also smiled at his loving parents. Okay, I'm going to take a shower and go to bed, said the young man as he walked up the stairs. Good night Ka-san, Tu-san. The blonde stepped into his shower and sighed when the hot water ran down his body. Washing away the grime and sweat that had accumulated on his body in the hours he spent under the overpass, Naruto did feel stress and pressure from all the responsibility placed on him, as he was the only man who hundreds of people could get instant medical attention from, and that much pressure to get to anyone. But despite the stress, Naruto loved doing what he was doing. There was nothing like saving someone's life. In his room, Naruto kept many little gifts that his patient have him after he treated them, and he regrettably told his parents that his admirers gave them to him, which caused his mother to go on another one of her rants about not having a girlfriend before university. Honest to himself, Naruto had never really thought about having a girlfriend, mainly because he had different standard of women than other men. Since Naruto's eyes could see the very making of everyone's bodies, he could tell which girls were dieting too much, who had odd proportions because of plastic surgery, and even those who harmed their own bodies. Naruto had yet to find a woman who was just really healthy, who never dieted or even tried to change her body, which he didn't mind seeing that his mother would be against it anyway. It was Naruto's dream to become a doctor, and he had completed all the necessary work in order to make it into a good pre-med school. Opening a clinic used to be Naruto's ideal plan for his future, but now he would rather fly out to many poor places in the world, and aid people who would need his help. With his power, Naruto wouldn't need any sort of machines or advanced technology to diagnose people in rural places, so it made him the perfect traveling doctor. I should go get some more antibiotics at the pharmacy tomorrow. Naruto got out of the shower and slipped into his usual sleepwear, which consisted of a simple white t-shirt and a pair of black shorts. It had been a tiring day, and it was true that there was an exam coming up soon, so Naruto needed his rest if he wanted to keep up with his routine. Luckily for the young man, the lessons at school were ridiculously easy and he could sew most of them with his eyes closed, but he would still read up a bit for the exam. "Oni-chan," cried a sudden squeaky voice as an 8-year-old girl ran into the room with a bright smile on his face. Naruto smiled and let the girl jump into his arms. "Hey, Yuki-chan," replied the older brother as he held the little girl in his arms. Uzumaki Yuki was the biological daughter of the Uzumaki couple, and she had dark brown hair like her mother, but black eyes like her father. Naruto's parents had Yuki when he was 9 years old, and he welcomed the birth of his little sister with opened arms. The little girl looked up at her older brother like an idol, and she wanted to be a nurse who would work in her brother's clinic. Yuki was still in elementary school, but she also had good grades and was on a good track on her academic trail. Yuki sat in her brother's lap and looked up at him. "What took you so long to come home? I wanted to play with you." Naruto smiled at his sister, tired, and kissed her forehead. "Sorry, Yuki-chan, but I was studying at school," explained the older brother as Yuki pouted a little. "I'll play with you tomorrow, okay?" The little girl lightly slapped Naruto on his chest. "Fine, but you better come home earlier tomorrow." The blonde chuckled at his dear little sister and nodded. "I promise. Now go to bed, you have school tomorrow." Yuki pouted and begrudgingly jumped off of her brother's lap. "Okay, good night, Oni-chan." Naruto smiled as the little girl ran out of the room. She was truly the apple of his eye. The blonde had been taking care of his sister since she was born, not because his parents weren't there for her, but because he wanted to do it. As an older brother, Naruto made sure that his sister was as healthy as she could be, and would design a health chart for their mother to follow so she would have a healthy diet. Sometimes Naruto would make some custom bentos for his sister for lunch, and on occasion Yuki would manage to convince him to give her some candy and junk food as well. The blonde lied down on his bed and closed his eyes in thought. I don't get how some guys at school could be so perverted all the time. Naruto would sometimes run into the infamous perverted trio of Kuo Academy, and he would be disgusted by them every time. If he ever found someone peeking on his mother or sister, Naruto would beat them to within an inch of their lives. The blonde himself was a young man in his prime, and he too had his urges with the opposite sex, but he would never stoop as low as those three pathetic horn dogs. Oh, who cares about them? It's not like I will ever be friends with any of them. If Naruto wanted to, he could have many friends at school, but he just doesn't have time for anyone. Most of his effort was placed towards healing as much people as he could, and the remaining limited brain function was to focus on his family and studying, so Naruto just didn't find the time to make friends. The blonde would like to have a few friends his age so he could talk with, but he would leave that off until he was in university and had more time. I just want high school to end faster, it's so boring. As if fate was mocking Naruto, his day in school was even more boring than usual. The teacher decided that it was time to review past lessons so the class could refresh their memory before the exam, but Naruto just found it to be useless. The blonde sat in his desk with a book in front of him, but it was not any of his textbooks, it was the Holy Bible. Naruto had never been one to believe in God, but he found the stories in the Bible to be interesting. For some reason, churches and the Bible would offer him comfort and peace, even though he was not baptized. Some giggling behind him broke Naruto out of his concentration, and he peered through the corner of his eyes to see one of the perverted trio giggling to himself. "Why Yuma-chan?" muttered a goofy Hyodo Issei as he looked at some picture on his phone. Naruto shook his head and sighed inwardly at the man. Stupid horn dog. The blonde's usual spot was a window seat that was at the back of the room, and he often enjoyed the beautiful view it offered him of the outdoors. From the height of the classroom, Naruto could see some faraway mountains that almost pierced the sky with their height. It was a beautiful day, and the blue skies were free of any clouds. From where he was, Naruto saw the old schoolhouse, a building that had always intrigued him. The house was far away, but Naruto's eyes caught a pretty shade of red by the window, and it was gone as soon as it appeared. I wonder what that was. The day was finally over, and Naruto enjoyed a nice breath of fresh air as he made his way out of the school. According to his timetable, Naruto didn't have to visit any places today because it was a day he left open so he could spend more time with his family. It has been a while since he went home right after school, and looked forward to having a nice home-cooked dinner with his parents and sister. But just as fate would have it, Naruto heard some odd whimpering in a back alley. The blonde walked into the alley and was shocked to see a very sick dog lying on the ground. Well, animals aren't my specialty, but I guess I can give it a try. Naruto ran his hands over the dog and tried to feel if there was anything wrong with the dog's organs. As with that, his mind drifted into autopilot. Just like every other time Naruto was troubled with medical problems, time would seem to flow extra fast, and when he was finished with the dog, it was nightfall already. Naruto knew that his parents would be worried about him since he had told them that he would be home early, and his sister would be angry that he didn't come home to play with her. The blonde dreaded the conversation in his mind as he pulled out his phone and was about to text his father. Ah! Naruto's eyes widened at the painful cry, and he instantly ran to the origin of the scream. The blonde made it to a small park, and the scream came from a small area near a large fountain. Much to Naruto's shock, he saw Hyodo Issei lying in a pool of his own blood. There was a strange woman standing in front of him, dressed in a very revealing manner. Naruto absent-mindedly remarked in his mind that he knew one day the perverts would be killed by some woman, but he ran over to Issei's direction nonetheless. "What the hell are you doing?" cried the blonde as he ran into the scene. Issei looked up at Naruto with weak eyes as blood spilled from his mouth. The woman looked at Naruto and licked her lips. "Why can't a handsome man like you have a sacred gear instead? At least that way I would have enjoyed that stupid date." Naruto deduced that the woman was just crazy, but when he used his eyes to look at her, he was shocked to see that the wings on the woman's back were real. The woman was giving Naruto a strange sensation and left some bad taste in his mouth. Shaking his head of his strange feelings, Naruto looked down at Issei and found that his stomach had been pierced by some sharp object, and his stomach acid was beginning to poison him from the inside. "Hold on, Issei, I need to get you to a hospital." Naruto's eyes widened when he saw some sort of blade come towards him, and he instantly jumped out of the way. The woman was holding some sort of light in her hands, and it was apparently her weapon. Naruto was on guard as the woman walked up to him with a smile on her face, and it irritated him to end. The woman charged at him again, and Naruto could only dodge as the blade of light threatened to slice his jugular open. "What the hell is your problem?" cried the blonde as he jumped over a fence. The woman slashed through the fence and stared into Naruto's eyes. "Hey, it seems that you have some sort of power yourself too." Naruto knew that he had to find some way to fight back so he could call the police and get help for Issei, so he used his eyes to analyze the woman's body. The blonde found that the woman's left side was more vulnerable than her right, and there was an old wound on the left side of her hips. It seemed that the woman's hip was shattered once before, and it looked like she was still suffering small amount of pain from it based on how it healed up. But before Naruto could make up his mind, his eyes widened when the woman fired a blade of light straight into his chest. The blonde tried to breathe, but his lungs were punctured from his wound, and blood was rapidly seeping into his windpipe. Naruto fell to the ground as his body twitched uncontrollably. The blade was still stabbed into his chest as indescribable pain coursed through his body. The woman stood over Naruto while shaking her head. If I weren't on a tight schedule, one would have gave you a nice night before killing you. With that, the woman flew into the sky and vanished as some black feathers hovered down to the ground. Is this the end? Thought Naruto as his consciousness became fainter as each moment passed. Why did this even happen? I was just going home for dinner. The images of his parents and sister flashed through his mind as he felt his own flood flow down his body. I still have so much I want to do. Naruto still wanted to become a doctor. He wanted to help more people. He wanted to see Yuki grow up. He wanted to learn cooking from his mother. He wanted to take his father on a golfing trip. He wanted to find the love of his life, get married and have children. This can't be the end. Just as Naruto's eyes were about to close, he caught the fluttering ends of strand of crimson red hair. I wasn't summoned here by you, said a melodic voice from above Naruto. But it seems that I should help you too. Naruto finally blacked out as he fell into a deep slumber. My son, said a deep voice from all directions as Naruto floated in the midst of nothingness. This is the official beginning of your journey. And I know you will go well. Naruto opened his eyes, and saw that from all the darkness that enveloped him, a large origin of light was shining down from above him. Just as your brother had done before, you will try to bring true peace between humans, devils, and fallen angels. Naruto felt a warm sensation on his right hand, and when he grasped his hands closed, he felt that there was some sort of hilt in his hand. I grant you this weapon, and you will bestow your judgment to all those before you, as you are a god among men. Naruto stared into the large bright light and felt peculiar warmth spread out his body, and a surge of power began to grow at his core. The sunlight broke through the window of Naruto's room and landed on his face. Where am I? Thought Naruto as he opened his eyes and saw a familiar white ceiling. Was that all a dream? If it was, then how the hell did I get home? The blonde looked around his surroundings and found that he was indeed in his room. Everything looked as he left them and nothing was out of the ordinary. Naruto lifted his hand to rub his chest, and found that there was no wound. There was not even a scratch. He used his eyes to scan his body and found that nothing was wrong with him. He was as healthy as ever. The blonde tried to find the surge of power that he felt before, but he found nothing. What the hell happened? Asked the young man to himself as he tried to rub his eyes with both hands. But for some reason his left arm wouldn't budge. Naruto turned his head to look, and he was utterly shocked when he saw some strands of red hair sticking out from under the blanket. There was a weight leaning onto his arm, and it began to move along with a large part of the blanket. The blonde instantly sat up on the bed, and was even more shocked when he saw that he was as naked as he was when he was born. Naruto's eyes were glued to the hump under his blanket as it was sitting up. Good morning, said a beautiful voice as a beautiful girl emerged from the blanket. Naruto's jaw dropped as he sat motionlessly on his bed. What the hell? The blonde had seen the same woman somewhere before. She was the most popular girl at his school. Rias Gremory? Rias smiled at the shocked look on Naruto's face as she rested her delicate face on her knees. Yes. But I am also your master, muttered the girl as she leaned closer to Naruto. It's nice to officially meet you, Uzumaki Naruto. I am Rias Gremory, a devil. Naruto's shocked expression didn't change at all throughout her words. And you are my newest knight. As if Naruto was not troubled enough. His bedroom door suddenly opened. Naruto, it's time to wake up, said a cheerful Kurenai as she walked into her son's room. Naruto just knew that his ears would be hurting in a few seconds. Ka-san, calm down and let me explain. Kurenai finally got sight of the whole situation. Her son was in bed with a girl. They were both naked. There were no clothes in sight. And the girl had a satisfied smile on her face. Oh my God, cried the mother as loud as she could. My little boy has been defiled. Chapter 2. Fallen Angel. It had been a long time since Naruto felt the need to run away from his room, and it felt very foreign to him. The small room with white walls and hardwood floors had been his safe haven since he was a child. It was his personal space, and his cool-down room, but that no longer felt like the case. The blonde's large queen-size bed was occupied by one of the most beautiful girls he had ever laid eyes on, and his door was blocked by his catatonic mother. Naruto stood in the middle of his room without any idea how he ended up in such an embarrassing situation while he wondered where in the name of God were his boxers. He never would have imagined that one morning he would be caught naked in bed with an equally naked woman by his strict mother. The embarrassment was almost overwhelming, and Naruto just wanted to crawl into a hole and hide. Rias looked a little clueless as she smiled at Kurenai. Good morning, Okawa-sama. While it was a friendly sentiment in Japanese culture to call a friend's mother as mother, Kurenai completely disregarded it and freaked out even more. Naruto! Cried the furious woman with an evil glare. What the hell did you do? Kurenai turned over to Rias and held her fists tightly. And did you take advantage of my son? Naruto backed away from his angry mother while waving his hands in the air. Ka-san, calm down and let me explain, exclaimed the blonde as he tried his best to cover his manhood with his hands. Oh, who the hell am I kidding? There is no way to explain this. Luckily for Naruto, someone outside the door spoke up. Ka-chan, what is going on? Asked little Yuki with her cute girly voice. Is Oni-chan home? Kurenai quickly jumped out of her son's room and slammed the door close before her little girl could see inside. It's nothing, exclaimed the mother a little too loudly. Your brother just slept in again. Just go brush your teeth and get ready for breakfast. Okay, answered the little girl quietly, wondering what was wrong with her mother. Just as the Yuki made her way into the bathroom, Kurenai ran back into her own room and busted through the master bathroom. Honey, cried the woman at her husband who was in the shower. Our son brought a girl home, and I think they slept together. Asuma almost tripped inside the shower and dropped the soap on his toes. What? Kurenai nodded with a scared expression on her face. Yes, they were both naked. The father then had a huge grin on his face. That's my boy, I am so proud. Kurenai just smacked her husband on the face, and proceeded to explain to him once again, about the dangers of having a girlfriend so soon. All the while, Naruto's face was getting redder and redder because his parents' loud conversation traveled through all walls of the house, and the small smile on Ria's face did not help at all. The blonde himself was more perplexed than anyone in the house, and he wondered if he really did have sex with Rias Gremory the previous night. Having sex with the beautiful woman wouldn't be a bad thing at all, and he was slightly proud that he had his first time with the most beautiful woman in school, but he couldn't remember any of it. With a sigh, Naruto went and locked his room door. Okay, Rias-senpai, care to tell me why you were in my room? Asked the young man, trying his best to not stare at her large breasts and pink nipples. What the hell did you mean by master or devil? Rias smiled and crossed her legs over one another. Well, as I said, I am a devil. Naruto looked at the woman as if she was crazy. What are you talking about? The red-haired beauty smiled sweetly at Naruto and stood up. Don't you remember anything about last night? Asked the girl as her delicate fingers traced Naruto's chest. How you were stabbed in the chest by a fallen angel. Naruto's eyes widened as he backed away from the girl. How did you know about my dream? Rias shook her head and walked back closer to Naruto. It was not a dream. Everything you saw and experienced yesterday was real. The blonde looked into Ria's soft green eyes as she spoke. You came across Hyodo Issei dying on the ground, and when you tried to help him you too, were killed by a fallen angel. Naruto's own fingers traced over the wound that was supposed to be on his chest. Issei accidentally summoned through his blood one of my flyers, and I decided to revive both of you. The blonde calmly exhaled and looked directly into Rias' eyes. You were saying that I actually died last night. And you are some kind of devil who revived me because of that pervert. Rias giggled at Naruto's insult to Issei and nodded. Yes, and now you shall devote your life to me, whispered the girl as his hand reached out to caress Naruto's chin while her fingers traced his lips. I am your master, spoke Rias with her lips dangerously close to Naruto's. Naruto narrowed his eyes at the girl and placed his hands on her shoulders. Okay, listen here lady, spoke Naruto with iron voice. I don't know what the hell you are on, but stop this bullshit. Rias sighed. I expected you to be skeptical, unlike Issei you are a man of logic, and I know this is a hard pill to swallow. The girl walked over to Naruto's desk chair, where she placed her clothes, and started to dress. But I assure you that everything I have told you is true, and I will explain more later on at school. Naruto blushed hard when Rias bent over to put on her panties while giving him an explicit view of her womanhood, and he found covering his manhood with his hands to be increasingly difficult as he watched her cup her breasts into her bra. Come here, softly said Rias as she turned her back at Naruto. Help me clip my bra. Naruto shook his head of his dirty thoughts, and walked over with shaky hands. This is the craziest morning ever, muttered the young man as he closed Rias' bra, while desperately to suppress his obvious arousal that was threatening to poke her lower back. Suddenly someone knocked on the door, and Naruto was instantly on guard. Who is it? Oni-chan, cried little Yuki's voice, which allowed Naruto a surge of relief. Ka-chan says breakfast is ready, and wants you and your friend to come down to eat. Naruto resisted the urge to collapse to the ground with embarrassment. Okay. We'll be down in a minute. Your clothes were soaked in blood last night, so I threw them away, said a fully dressed Rias with a smile on her face. So you should just dress in whatever you have in your closet. Naruto sighed as he hurried to his closest while covering his pride, and quickly threw on his spare school uniform. Dressing in front of Rias felt very weird to Naruto, and his hands shook as he pulled up his pants. The blonde never really interacted so closely with any girl before, and he was very uncomfortable about having Rias stare at him as he dressed. Rias smiled sweetly again as she opened the door. Shall we go down for breakfast? It smells amazing down there. The blonde sighed and ran his fingers through his hair. Let's just get this over with. It had always been a tradition of the small family to have a big breakfast, so Rias and Naruto were greeted with a large table filled to the brim with food. Naruto avoided eye contact as he sat down on the dinner table, while Rias kindly smiled and bowed to his entire family. Yuki, being the little girl she was, smiled back and started to ask Rias all sort of question, but the one that took the cake was, "Are you Oni-chan's girlfriend?" Naruto peeked up from his plate and saw the livid expression on his mother's face. "Oh, I hope you won't be crying after Ka-san is finished with you," thought the young man as he tried his best to tune out the incoming conversation between his mother and Rias. "How did you do that?" exclaimed Naruto loudly as he and Rias headed towards the direction of their school. The conversation between his mother and Rias turned out to be nothing like expected, and they actually got along quite well. The strangest part was when his mother asked if she was her son's girlfriend. Rias had replied that they were only close friends and sleeping together naked was really how teenagers interacted these days. And his mother actually bought it. Rias smiled with a wink. "I used my powers on your parents, and now they won't suspect that you might be hiding a girlfriend from them." Naruto turned a tad serious and crossed his arms together. "So you really are a devil?" The red-haired beauty smiled and kept her gaze ahead. "I know you won't believe me until you've seen some decisive proof, but I can't show you anything here in public," said the girl before she looked over at Naruto. "I will send a messenger over later to you, and I will give you your much-needed proof." The blonde man sighed and nodded. Sure. The one thing that bothered Naruto the most was not the fact that he was killed the previous night, but the strange voice that he heard when he was dying. The voice felt warm and loving, yet extremely powerful. The blonde could recall the voice implying that he was his father, and mentioned something about doing something that his brother had done before. Naruto could suspect that he was his biological late father talking to him from the great beyond, but what kind of person was his father before he died? The blonde's mind was filled with unanswered questions, and he knew that he needed to find out the answers to all of them. Naruto also remembered that he had held a sword in his hand while fading away, and it gave him a surge of power that was unlike anything he had felt before. Whatever it was, Naruto intended to find out. "Oh yeah? What happened to that pervert?" asked Naruto curiously. Rias giggled again at Naruto's insult to Issei, and just nodded. "He was as injured as you were, so after I revived him I had one of my subordinates take care of him." Rias looked into Naruto's blue eyes with wonder. "I revived Issei because he possesses a power that is quite rare in the world. But when I saw you I found that you also have a great amount of power inside you." Naruto narrowed his eyes at the young woman. "What do you mean?" Rias smiled. "You know what I mean. I can tell that you've been using your powers for a long time already." Naruto just looked on ahead and remained silent. "But other than that you possess another kind of power, one that you have yet to activate." "What are you talking about?" asked the blonde suspiciously. The beauty just smiled and shook her head. "I'll tell you later when we are in private." Naruto sighed and nodded. "Fine." The blonde took the time to take a good look at the young woman beside him, and he had to admit that she was beautiful. From his eyes, Naruto could see that she was very healthy, her body was in top shape, and she didn't seem to have dieted before. All of Rias' internal organs were in full function, and her brain showed a lot of activity. Overall, Rias was a woman that was exactly Naruto's type. A young beautiful woman who had healthy and treated her body with respect. "Oh my god!" cried a random girl as a crowd gathered in front of the school. Naruto-kun is walking together with Rias Wanisama. Naruto honestly didn't realize that they were at the school already, and sighed when he saw the shocked looks on the people's faces. There were enough rumors of him floating around the school as it was, and he didn't need people saying that he got together with the most popular girl in school. But even Naruto had to admit that he and Rias stood out like a sore thumb, being two of the few people in the school who were not fully Japanese, and the eccentric red and blonde hair colors really caught people's attention. They look so cute together. Yeah, Naruto-kun looks so much cooler standing next to Rias-senpai. Doesn't Rias-senpai look a lot happier than normal? Maybe they are in love. Naruto sighed as he shook his head at the sheer amount of gossip that travels around the school. He was quite positive that by lunchtime, everyone in the school would start saying that he started dating Rias Gremory, and people will start questioning him when they pass in the halls. Naruto had enjoyed his isolationist reputation in school, but it looked like it was not going to last for long. I'm going to class, said Naruto as he turned away from Rias. I'll see you later. Rias nodded with a sweet smile. Sure, I'll send someone over to you soon. The blonde nodded and went on his way to his homeroom, but he couldn't help but turn back and looked at the beautiful woman who had come into his life so strangely. Naruto had never thought or even imagined that something so bizarre would randomly happen to him. The young man was still a skeptic, but he was intrigued by the notion of Rias trying to prove to him that she was in fact a devil, and he had somehow become her slave after she saved his life. With a sigh, Naruto walked into the mid-sized classroom and ignored the fervent gaze of many girls along with the whispers and giggles that came with it. It was just a physics class, so Naruto could almost entirely tune out the teacher and allow his mind to relax after such a bizarre morning. Even after a year of intense medical adventures with the homeless population of the town, Naruto had to say that the excitement he got from Rias in the morning was the most intense feeling he had ever experienced. The young woman was beautiful, and while she appeared to be innocent and cute, she was also dignified and majestic. There was a sense of pride in Rias' composure, and she displayed an aura of confidence that suggested her sophistication. The image of Rias' naked body was still very vivid in Naruto's mind, and he didn't think it would fade away anytime soon. Rias was the definition of feminine beauty, and even though Naruto had never really been attracted to any women before, he couldn't help but feel infatuation for her. Good morning, Naruto-kun, said an old man with a pair of glasses on his face. Naruto smiled and bowed to the man. Good morning, Kenshin-sensei, how are you this morning? The teacher smiled and nodded. It's been good, thank you. Kenshin walked back to behind his desk and clapped his hands together to get the class attention. Okay class, take out your textbooks and start doing the questions on page 205. Naruto sighed as he pretended to read from his textbook in his desk. The blonde knew that the teacher would allow him to slack off in class occasionally because he was the top student of the school, and had good relations with every teacher that taught him. I still have to head over to the east end of town today. I haven't been there for a week already and I know that some are still sick. Some rumbling in front of Naruto had knocked him out of his stupor again, and he looked up to see the pervert trio whispering to each other. Naruto had almost completely forgotten about Issei since he arrived at the school, and the pervert was apparently fine. From what Naruto remembered, Issei was stabbed in his stomach, which made his stomach acid burn him inside out. Based on his condition, Issei should have died from internal bleeding and blood poisoning, but as Naruto scanned his body, the young man was perfectly fine. I know that if last night was real, Issei would have died for sure if he didn't make it to the hospital within 5 minutes, maybe Rias did save us both. Before Naruto knew it, class was already over and the people around him were starting to pack up. The young man sighed and started to clean up his desk as well, but soon a shadow blocked the light from his window. Uzumaki-san, said a smooth voice, and Naruto looked up to see Yuto Kiba smiling down at him with an extended hand. Rias Bucko sent me here to invite you to our clubroom. Naruto narrowed his eyes as he stood and shook Kiba's hand. I didn't expect you to come get me, Kiba-san. The girls in the class had hearts in their eyes as they stared at the two hottest young men in the school chatting with each other. But whatever, I look forward to what Rias-senpai has to say to me. Oh, this is heaven. They look alike, both of them have beautiful blonde hair. I really want to join their club. Kiba chuckled at the reaction of the class as he placed his hands in his pockets. Our club is in the old schoolhouse on the edge of campus, but I have one more person to bring with us. Kiba walked over to Issei, who was staring at the girls of the classroom. Issei-san, can you please come with me and Naruto-san? Issei gave Kiba a look before he stood up with a sigh. Sure. What? Cried a random girl in the class. Why the hell is that pervert hanging out with Naruto-kun and Kiba-kun? Another girl shook her head violently as she cried out in frustration. Don't hang out with that pervert, Naruto-kun, Kiba-kun, cried the girl loudly, you'll catch something off him. Issei grunted in annoyance and walked out with Kiba. They are just spouting nonsense. I didn't expect you to revive 2 evil pieces in one night, bucko, said one Himejima Akeno, one of the 2 great beauties in the school. Are you sure they are worthy? Rias sighed as she stood in her shower and let the hot water run down her body. Issei possessed some kind of sacred gear that attracted the fallen angels, so I have good faith in his potential, and Naruto possesses a very peculiar gift that will also be useful at times. Akeno sat down on a chair next to the shower with her legs overlapping one another. Does Naruto-san have a sacred gear as well? The club president nodded from within her shower. I strongly think he does. I felt some sort of power inside him when I revived him yesterday, something I have never felt before, said the beauty softly through the shower curtain. But besides his potential sacred gear, Naruto also has the ability to somehow diagnose people's bodies, or something like that. I've only seen him do something akin to that last night. Interesting, muttered Akeno as a soft smile graced her lips. So he has 2 kinds of power, that's not very common at all. A series of knocking broke the girls out of their conversation, and Akeno stood to greet the people at the door. Kiba stood at the door along with Naruto and Issei, both looking around the Gothic-style room with interest. But while Naruto was busy with the architecture of the place, Issei was staring at the cute white-haired girl sitting the couch, and the gently beauty standing in front of them. Kiba smiled as he gestured to the girl on the couch. This young lady is Teju Kaneko-san, a first-year student. The man then turned to the lady standing in front of them with a smile. This is Himejima Akeno-san, a third-year student who is our senior. Issei had blush on his face as he bowed to the girls. It's nice to meet you all. Naruto bowed also, but had a blank look on his face. It's a pleasure to meet you both, Akeno-san, Kaneko-san. Kaneko just nodded silently as Akeno walked up to the 2 boys and bowed. It's nice to meet you too, Naruto-san, Issei-san, said the woman with a kind smile. I welcome you to our club, and as vice president, I hope you enjoy your time here. While Issei spent his time ogling at Akeno's body, Naruto just sighed and ran his fingers through his hair. Sorry Akeno-zero-san, I mean no disrespect, but I am only here because Rias-senpai had told me she had proof of last night's event. Issei immediately looked over at the blonde. Why, you remember it too? Akeno nodded with her perpetual smile. She does, but Bucko is in the shower right now, she will be out shortly. Issei and Naruto both looked towards the classy shower that was rather open at the corner of the room, and saw a clear silhouette of Rias' naked body in the shower. The sound of water dripping onto her luscious body filled the room, as the smell of sweet shampoo caressed the senses. Naruto looked at the young man standing next to him, and was surprisingly annoyed at his perverted expression, and he had to look the other way in disgust. Your perverted look is disgusting, muttered Naruto as he closed his eyes and crossed his arms. Issei glared over at the blonde and balled his fists up. Shut up you weirdo. Naruto-senpai is right, spoke a stoic Kaneko as she munched on a piece of chocolate. Your perverted expression is disgusting. Issei grunted in annoyance and stepped back a little with embarrassment, which made Naruto smirk a little. The water suddenly stopped, and after another minute the shower curtain was pulled to the side and revealed a fresh Rias Gremory in her school uniform. The beauty's hair was still wet, so she held a towel in her hand and gently ran it through her crimson strands. There was something about Rias' hair that Naruto found to be extremely attractive, and its beauty was only enhanced by her gorgeous face. Rias smiled at Naruto sweetly. I'm sorry, but since I stayed over at your place last night, I didn't get a chance to take a shower. Issei's nose flared as he turned to Naruto and gripped the collar of his shirt. Rias-senpai spent the night with you, cried the teenager with shock and jealousy. You damn weird lucky bastard. Naruto glared at Issei and shoved him away. Shut up you damn pervert, exclaimed the blonde angrily as he towered over Issei. Nothing happened between Rias-senpai and I, so shut your mouth before I make you. Rias clapped her hands together with a smile on her face. Okay, that's enough, said the young woman as Naruto retracted his glare from Issei. Now that everyone is here, I officially welcome you to the Occult Research Club, exclaimed Rias with a bright smile on her face as she looked at Naruto and Issei. But research is just a cover-up in our club. It is more like a hobby. The group settled into couches with Rias sitting in the main seat looking at all her subjects. Issei looked up blankly. What do you mean? Rias smirked and looked over at Naruto. I'll be frank here, we are all devils. Naruto narrowed his eyes at the woman and smirked. That is indeed very frank, but are you telling the truth? Rias smiled and stood up to walk closer to Naruto. Do you remember the black-winged woman from last night? Asked the beauty as both Naruto and Issei's eyes widened. She was a fallen angel. Issei's eyes widened as Naruto scoffed inwardly, but Rias continued. Once angels serving God, they were sent down to the underworld because of their wicked hearts. Naruto looked up at the woman and crossed his arms. Fallen angels? Rias nodded with a smirk. Yes, these angels try to manipulate humans and kill us devils, further explained the beauty. This is a conflict that has been brewing since ancient times, a war to decide who will rule the underworld. We also have real angels sent by God himself to destroy us, so we are pretty much being attacked from all sides. Naruto suddenly stood up and stared down at Rias, who was in front of him. This is enough, muttered the man with a soft voice. I don't want to hear any of the anymore. With that, Naruto turned and made his way out of the room. I am a man of science, and I refuse to believe in such nonsense. The red-haired beauty smiled and shook her head. You will see, Naruto, I am sure of it, said the woman as Naruto opened the door. You are my knight, and I know you will come back to us. Naruto walked out of the door without another word, and closed the door behind him. Started Kaneko with her stoic voice. He is rather ignorant, isn't he? Issei stood up and scoffed at the closed door. Don't mind that weirdo, exclaimed the young man loudly. He's just a guy who thinks he is better than everyone else, continued Issei as the group listened to him. How dare he point out I'm a pervert? I bet he is just as pervert as I am, always disappearing from class. Issei ranted as he turned to face the others. He probably runs off to peep at girls in the locker room. Rias cleared her throat. Actually, I know where Naruto goes during his constant absence in school. Akeno looked interested and smiled. So you really were interested in him from the start? The red-haired woman shook her head with a smile. Not really, it was only after last night that I decided to investigate on Naruto with my familiar, and she searched all over the city and asked many people for his information, and I am very surprised at what she found, said Rias with her sweet voice. Issei snorted and looked away. What does he do? Buy porn all over the city? Rias looked serious as she turned to face her subjects. Naruto has the power to see people's internal bodies, and he uses that power to help people all over town, started the young woman as the others listened on with surprise. According to this homeless man I spoke to, Naruto had been visiting all sorts of homeless shelters and areas, and cured them of their sickness. Issei's eyes widened in shock at the news. The homeless man told me that he was eternally grateful towards Naruto, because Naruto saved him and countless others in the past year. Rias smiled and looked toward the door. They call him a hero. Kiba smiled and nodded his head. What a good man, I had no idea he went to such lengths to help people. Akeno nodded. Yes, it is very admirable of him. Kaneko chewed on her snacks as she looked at Issei. Someone like you shouldn't insult someone like him. Issei looked down at the ground feeling a little guilty. Wow. That weirdo is actually such a nice person? Naruto had his hands in his pockets as he walked down a busy street near the area he was stabbed, and his mind was going 100 miles per hour trying to reason out logical reasons. The blonde clearly remembered the strange woman stabbing him in the chest, but he just couldn't accept that he was pulled into a conflict between beings that should only exist in fantasy books. Naruto had no faith in God or any religion. He found the notion of religion to be a good way to create order out of chaos back in the time when man had no understanding of their world, and was outdated in the present day. It was very hard to Naruto to accept that some people in his school were actually devils and angels were trying to kill them. I know I was stabbed here last night, thought the blonde man as he rubbed his chest with his fingers. How can a wound so serious just disappear in one night? There must be something logical about this. Naruto rubbed his temple as he shook his head to clear his head. The scene in the club room kept playing itself over and over again in Naruto's mind, and he was finding it harder and harder to refute Rias' reasons, but he couldn't just believe that heaven and hell actually exists, and the ancient war was still going on. The blonde felt a little guilty about walking out of the club room so disrespectfully, as Rias was potentially a person who had saved his life, and gave him another chance to see his family again. Maybe I should go back to apologize tomorrow? Naruto's mind was so engrossed to his thought, he failed to notice that he had already walked back to the very place he was stabbed the night before. A sense of foreboding suddenly rushed through Naruto's body as he looked back behind him. What is this feeling? A woman was making her way to Naruto, and her closed leather jacket displayed the oddly malicious moonlight to Naruto. I stray. Axed the woman to herself as her black hair waved in the air with the cold wind. Such a weak devil shouldn't wander the streets alone. Naruto looked around him for signs of other people, but was shocked to see that he was the only person in the perimeter. The blonde grunted and looked back at the woman with glare. Who are you, and what do you want with me? A pair of black wings suddenly grew out of the woman's back as she viciously smirked at Naruto. I am a fallen angel, you are a devil, so what do you think I am going to do? Said the woman as she summoned a blade made out of light into her hands. Die, devil scum. Naruto leapt out of the way as the blade flew past him. Fallen angel? Muttered the blonde as he got up to his feet. She is like the woman from last night. These people actually exist? The woman threw another few blade at him, and Naruto was dodging from left to right. His only advantage was that with his eyes he could see which muscles the woman were using, which would allow him to predict her movements a little. The woman chuckled. You are more agile than I expected. This kind of hunting is fun. The blonde grunted as he pulled himself from left to right. Damn. This woman is really going to kill me. Suddenly, the faces of his family flashed into Naruto's mind, and he saw his parents and little sister crying. The thoughts of dying once again filled Naruto's mind as he imagined what his family would feel like if he died, and he was filled with an unprecedented surge of motivation. He had to survive so he could go back to his family. A familiar surge of power once again lingered along Naruto's right hand, and it was increasing in power with every passing second. I need more power, cried Naruto in his mind as he suddenly gripped his right hand. A powerful light erupted from Naruto's fist as a shockwave blasted through the area. The blonde was shocked to feel his hand actually holding onto something, and he looked down to see that he was holding on a hilt of a blade. It was a simple long sword with a white hilt, and it was shaking with power. But the one thing that Naruto didn't understand was the blade of the sword, which was all rusty and looked terrible. The woman laughed as she pointed at Naruto. Oh, you have a sacred gear. But that piece of trash looks like it would break if it hits me. Naruto growled and ignored the appearance of his blade. This will have to do, cried the young man as he ran forward, and suddenly found that he was many times faster than before. With a second, Naruto appeared in front of the woman, and with a hard slash of his blade, he sliced the woman across her stomach. What? Cried the fallen angel as she jumped back. Naruto knew that he couldn't let her recover her movements, so he charged again with his newfound speed. I need to attack her arms first, thought the young man as he appeared next to the woman and sliced open her right triceps muscle. As the woman was screeching in pain, Naruto saw that she was about to swing at him with her left arm, so he quickly knelt down to dodge. Just as the woman's left arm was passing over his head, Naruto lifted his blade up and allowed the woman to slice open her own left forearm. I will not die tonight, cried Naruto as he kicked the woman on the stomach and sent her backwards to the ground. The fallen angel got to her feet and glared at Naruto. You're a knight. Naruto ignored whatever the woman was saying and raised his blade up into the air. Get out of my sight, you crazy bitch. The blonde slashed the blade down as hard as he could and sent a crescent blade of gray energy at the woman. The traveling blade crashed into the ground and blasted the woman further back as she spat out some blood. Why you will pay for this? Cried the woman with a weak voice as her wings barely got her into the air. Naruto could see how extensive the woman's injuries were with his eyes, and knew that she could no longer attack him. You and whoever you belong to will be judged by us, cried the fallen angel as she vanished with a burst of speed. The blonde stared at the falling black feathers as he felt the power in his body. What is this? Naruto looked down at his blade with wonder. She said something about a sacred gear. Is this it? Naruto, called out a voice from behind the young man, and he looked back to see Rias. Rias senpai, replied Naruto with surprise. The beautiful woman walked up to Naruto with a smile on her face. Come back with me. I still have more things to explain to you. With that, Rias turned around and gestured Naruto to follow her, and this time she knew that he would be much more open-minded. Chapter 3. Life goes on. Thank you again, Naruto-san, exclaimed a middle-aged man with a bright smile on his face. You're a saint. The blonde just smiled back as he packed his medical supplies back into his backpack, and just waved his hand. Naruto had once again visited one of the many homeless-filled areas of the town, and it had been a busy day. The line for medical attention stretched to the ends of the long back alley they were in, and Naruto had used almost all of his supplies in the 6 hours he was present. It's my pleasure to help, replied Naruto as many others started to bow and thank him repeatedly. It had been a few days since Naruto had his encounter with the fallen angel, and his life had more or less changed forever. But he was glad that he still had the time to help people around town, and with his newfound speed as Rias Knight, Naruto could make it to many different places with only a few minutes' time. Stealing at night had also become a lot easier since his eyes could see in the dark very well after becoming a devil. A soft hand suddenly touched Naruto's shoulder, and he was surprised when he saw who it belonged to. Rias bucko? Hey Naruto. Chirped the beautiful girl with a smile on her face. I was just passing by and I wanted to see how you were doing. Naruto smiled back and nodded. Today was a good day. Many people were here today and they all got the help they needed. After hearing the full story behind the conflict of devil, angels, and fallen angels, Naruto decided to join the Occult Club and learn more about them. The blonde could no longer find any ground to stand on when he tried to refute Rias' claims, especially after he managed to summon a pair of wings from his back. So this is where you go all the time? Asked Rias as she looked around at the large crowd of people chatting amongst each other, all with smiles on their faces. Naruto sighed as he stood next to the young woman. Not really, but all the places I go to are pretty much like this, said the blonde with a sad voice as he looked at the poor conditions of his patients. This is one of the reasons why I refused to believe in you when we first met. If God and devils are real, then why are there still so many people suffering? Rias looked over at her knight as he spoke. Sometimes I wonder if God is even listening to prayers anymore. The red-haired beauty smiled as she faced Naruto and looked up at him. Well, at least they have you to help them. Naruto smiled and looked into Rias' green eyes. Well, it's the least I can do. Rias placed a hand on Naruto's cheek and leaned closer to him. I'm glad my handsome knight can help so many people. The blonde blushed at the affection and close proximity, and just nodded. Thank you, bucko. Oh Naruto-san, cried a woman behind him as a bunch of people looked over. Is this your girlfriend? With that, Naruto's blush intensified as all of his patients looked over at the mention of his girlfriend. Everyone had smiles on their faces as they came forward to see Rias better, and many of them thought that she made a great girlfriend for their hero. Naruto looked good next to Rias. There was just something about their red and blonde hair that really complemented each other. Naruto shook his head with his blush still on. No, this is the president of my club. The blonde's voice didn't reach anyone's ears as most people crowded over to Rias. Oju-chan, Naruto-san is a real keeper. Make sure you take good care of him, okay? Asked a middle-aged lady with a smile on her face. He is our hero. Another woman came over along with her young son. Yes, Naruto-san is a great man, and you are so lucky to have him, she exclaimed with a happy smile. Make sure you don't let anyone take him away. Rias just smiled at the people around her as they continued to ramble on about what great man was Naruto. All the while, Naruto stood back and watched the scene with a smile on his face, not because of the compliments he was getting from his patients, but from the smile on Rias' face. If it was any other girl, Naruto knew that they would freak out when so many homeless people were crowding around her, but Rias didn't seem to mind at all. The smile of the red-haired beauty's face was bright and true, and it made Naruto's respect for her increase once again. I know Naruto is really one of a kind, chirped Rias as she walked back to Naruto and wrapped her arms around him. Own. That's why he is mine. The crowd smiled at the sight as Naruto blushed at the double implications of Rias' words, and he really doubted if anyone in the crowd would even imagine that he actually belonged to her. Naruto was still having a very hard time being classified as Rias' knight, which was a better way of saying her servant, but he had no choice in the matter. Rias saved his life when he was killed, and so he had to devote his life to her. It was as simple as that. Okay everyone, started Naruto as he swung his backpack over his shoulder. We have to go now, I'll see you all later. With that Naruto turned around with Rias and they both made their way out of the alley, but Rias was still holding onto Naruto's arm. Okay Naruto-san, go enjoy your date. Naruto blushed again at the thought of actually dating Rias. And he hoped that she didn't see it. The Occult Research Club members were all gathered inside their club room again, and were all sitting in their usual seat on the couches. Rias was going over the activities of the club, while Naruto and Issei were once again handed flyers for them to hand out to potential contractors. It had been almost a week since Naruto had joined the club, and he was starting to grow accustomed to his responsibilities. Handing out the flyers doesn't take Naruto much time, seeing that he had enough power for Akeno to teleport him to his destinations, unlike Issei. Damn it! Cried Issei as he made his way to the door. What sort of devil has to ride a bike to his summoner? Naruto smirked as the perverted man walked out of the room, and smiled at Akeno when she handed him his own stack of flyers. Thank you, Akeno-san. The blonde had become quite friendly with the members of his club, with Issei being the least of his priorities. He enjoyed the company of some friends after so many years of isolation, and he found the casual conversations to be relaxing and comfortable. Kiba was a much nicer man than Naruto originally thought. He wasn't the playboy that everyone said he was. Akeno acted like a kind older sister to the group, and she would often offer tea and cookies for everyone while in meetings. Naruto really appreciated her friendship. There was also Kaneko, who was the youngest out of the group. Being the older brother that he was, Naruto often bought the girls snacks and meals when he would go to the club for meetings, and she started to warm up to him. Then there was Rias, the president of the club and the one person Naruto wanted to really get to know better. From what Naruto knew, Rias was a high-class devil, and was the heiress to one of the most powerful families in the underworld. She was a third-year student of Kuo Academy, and she was known as the most beautiful girl in the school. And the one thing that always seems to pop into Naruto's mind was that her smile was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. After you are done with these you are free to go, Naruto, said Rias with a smile on her face. I know you are due on the east end of town today. Naruto smiled as he stepped into the magic circle. Thank you, bucko. Akeno smiled at Naruto as she channeled her power through her spell. Good luck, Naruto-kun. The magic circle transported Naruto to his destination, and left the room with only the girls and Kiba after the light died down. Kaneko and Kiba both had their own summoning orders to do, so they excused themselves from the president and vice president, and left the room themselves. In the week that Naruto had joined the club, he actually formed 3 contracts already with the people he had visited, and all of them were women. It seemed that like Kiba, Naruto's handsome appearance helped him with his devil responsibilities. Rias sighed in relaxation as she sat down on the couch. The tea is really nice today, Akeno. Akeno sat down next to her best friend and held a cup of her own. So Rias, said the woman using her master's first name since they were alone. What do you think of Naruto-kun and Issei-kun? The high-class devil smiled and nodded. I think they are a fine addition to our group. Akeno smiled and nodded in agreement. Issei needs to be ironed out a lot more before he will be on the others' level, but I think Naruto will catch on very quickly. The black-haired lady nodded. Yes, he seems to be learning much faster than Kiba was when he first started, but I do find his sacred gear confusing. Rias nodded seriously. Yes, his sword feels really weird, it doesn't even feel dark like Kiba's swords, said the president as she looked at her queen. I feel that his devil powers do not work with his blade, it is as if his blade is limiting his power as he trains. Akeno took a sip of her tea before she looked back up at her master. I feel a tremendous power coming from within Naruto, and I know that he has the potential to be a very powerful knight. The president nodded again. I agree, but only time will show how strong Naruto really is. After another busy night with his patients, Naruto fell asleep the moment his body fell onto his bed. Even with his new abilities as a knight, Naruto still felt fatigue after long hours of work, and sleep was the best thing on his agenda every day. Naruto was glad that the people who summon him for contracts would only ask him for normal things, such as cooking, shopping, dating advice, or gaming partner. The one strange encounter Naruto had with a summoner was with a woman who wanted him to sleep with her. It was safe to say that Naruto left that house in seconds. The sunlight landed on the closed eyes of Naruto as he slowly awoke from his slumber. Moaned Naruto in satisfaction as he enjoyed the comfort of his soft bed. The warmth under the blanket was perfect, and his bare skin felt great against the silk sheets on the bed. Naruto was too tired to change into his sleeping attire the previous night, so he just slept in a pair of boxers, which felt much better than his t-shirt and shorts. The one thing that really made his morning even more comfortable was the soft and warm pillow he had wrapped around his arms. The pillow was warm, soft, and had a very sweet smell of roses. 1 second. I don't have such a big pillow. Naruto opened his eyes, and he felt his entire body shudder when he saw that his pillow was actually the body of Rias Gremory, his master. Rias had her head tucked into the crook of Naruto's neck, her arms tightly wrapped around Naruto's waist, and had a small smile on her face as she continued to sleep. Her vibrant red hair was spread along the pillow they were sharing, and she had her chest pressed right up against Naruto's own. Holy shit, thought Naruto with widened eyes when he felt bare skin rub against his own. Is she naked under the blanket? Rias moaned softly in her sleep as she snuggled deeper against Naruto, and accidentally pushed her breasts against his chest as her nipples rubbed along his skin. Naruto's face was blood red as he felt his boxers tighten with his growing arousal, and he turned his pelvis away as much as possible in his position. but the movement of his body in the bed started to wake Rias from her peaceful sleep, and her eyes parted ever so slowly to see the blushing face of her knight looking at her. "Good morning, Naruto," whispered the beauty with a soft smile on her face. Naruto gulped as he looked onto his master's green eyes. "Gee, good morning, bucko," started the blonde with a faint whisper. "Why are you in bed with me?" Rias started to snuggle up against Naruto even more as she closed her eyes. "I wanted to check if you were okay after your summon from last night, but when I got here you were already asleep, so I decided to join you." The blonde tried to turn his obvious arousal away as he felt Rias' nipples rub against his side. "But why are you naked?" The beauty rested her head on Naruto's shoulder and started to drift off again. "I can't sleep unless I am nude," whispered Rias softly as her warm breath tingled the blonde's cheek. Naruto blushed harder as he saw the tent his manhood made under the covers. "This is a very compromising position for us. How about I go change first and you can have the bed for yourself?" The blonde really needed to get out of the bed before the woman would brush against his raging erection. The last thing he wanted was for Rias to see him as a pervert like Issei. Rias moaned and held onto Naruto harder. "Don't move, you make a very comfortable pillow," whispered the girl as she delicately placed a hand on Naruto's chest. "We still have a while before we need to get ready for school." Naruto closed his eyes and tried to level out his breathing with continuous deep breaths. After a full minute of silent relaxation, Naruto turned his head to look at his master who was sleeping peacefully beside him on the right. Naruto could feel that his right hand was against Rias' lower back, and he decided to try to relax into the situation. With a light touch, Naruto pulled Rias close to himself by the small of her back, turned himself to the side and used his left arm to secure her in place. Once again, Naruto's chest was up against Rias' breasts, and he didn't feel as hyped up as before, probably because he was busy focusing on her pretty face in front of him. Rias' plump lips were slightly parted as she breathed in and out silently, and they looked dangerously juicy and soft to Naruto's eyes. "No, I am not Issei," cried Naruto inside his mind as his attraction to Rias increased by the second. The blonde snapped his eyes closed and resumed his series of deep breaths, but it took longer than last time for him to fully calm down. Naruto finally opened his eyes, but he found Rias looking straight back at him. "Be bucko," exclaimed Naruto as he pulled back a little. Rias smiled as she winked at her knight. "Is it time for school yet?" "Almost, we have another hour and a half before class starts," softly replied Naruto with a small smile on his face. "Feel free to use the shower if you need it," said the young man as he hoped that his mother would not see Rias. Rias shook her head. "It's okay, I'll just take one at the club later," replied the red-haired beauty as she sat up on the bed, giving Naruto a very full view on her breasts and alluring slim waist. "Do you want to grab something to eat before school?" Naruto jumped out of bed and quickly slipped on a pair of sweatpants. "I know a good breakfast place near the school, I'll treat you there." With that, Naruto ran out of the room as fast as he could so Rias wouldn't see his erection sticking out from his pants. "Be back in a bit." Rias giggled at her knight as she started to put on her own clothes. "So cute. Your mother is such a good cook," happily said Rias as she smiled over at Naruto. In the end, Naruto never managed to pull Rias out of his house before his mother saw them together again, and she ended up commanding them to stay for breakfast. Kurenai seemed to have warmed up to Rias, and was quite gently and nice to her, which really surprised Naruto. Naruto's father smiled at him discreetly as he sat next to Rias, signaling that he approved of her. Then there was Yuki, the one person that had really taken a liking to Rias, and she chatted on with Rias the whole time they were eating. Naruto smiled as he held his backpack over one shoulder. "I still think the restaurant is better." The blonde hated the awkward moments with his family and Rias, but he was a little happy that his family all seemed to like his master. "I'll bring you there next time." Rias smiled and nodded. "Sure," muttered the beauty as she turned to face Naruto. "But let me fix this first." Naruto blushed as Rias reached up to his tie and began to fix it, and the smile on her face did not help the situation. "Thank you, bucko," said Naruto as he looked around his surroundings, and sighed when he saw many of the other students looking over at their direction. The rumors of him and Rias getting together had already gone viral in the past week, and they basically sealed their fate after Rias' affectionate gesture with his tie. The blonde had seriously considered asking Rias out on a date later on, but seeing that he was only one of her servants, he wouldn't be good enough for her. At least that will be for the moment. The beauty smiled and pulled back. "Now let's get to class, we may have some work to do." Naruto looked back at the entrance of the school and saw the huge crowd that was staring at their direction, and really didn't want to go anywhere near them. Hey, if you don't have anything important in class today, how about we skip school and go to one of the homeless shelters today? Rias was intrigued and stopped to look back at her knight. Is it okay for me to come with you? I don't know much about healing. The blonde smiled and nodded. It would be nice to have someone with me when I go. Rias smiled and grabbed onto Naruto's arm. Then sure, I've been wanting to help you in doing something so meaningful. Naruto quickly led his master away from the school, and inwardly sighed when he heard distant chatter and squeals coming from the school. At this point it would be impossible to deny the student body's claim that they were a couple, even though they were only friends at most. But Naruto felt rather happy that people thought he made a cute couple with Rias, and it gave him hope that if one day he would be promoted to a high-class devil, he would have a chance with Rias. The blonde led his master to his regular bus stop and got on the first bus that would take them to the southern parts of town, which was where a large portion of the homeless population resides. It was cute to watch Rias try to get on the bus without any knowledge of paying the driver, but thankfully Naruto was with her and he explained everything to her. It was the first time that Rias had ever been on a bus in her whole life, and it was quite refreshing for her. I've always wanted to go on a bus ride, chirped Rias happily as she sat next to Naruto at the back of an empty bus. Naruto chuckled as he settled his backpack on his lap. It's nicer when it is not so crowded, but when it is rush hour it is terrible, said the man before he leaned closer to his master. But after I became your knight, I just ran to most places because it would be faster than a bus. Rias giggled and nodded. Well, you are fast for such a young knight. I would say that you would surpass even Kiba with a little time, praised the young woman with a proud smile on her face. But enough about devils, tell me more about your family, suggested Rias with wink. The blonde smiled back and crossed his arms. Well, there isn't much to tell, started the man softly. My father is an engineer for a local company, and my mother is a normal housewife who also teaches piano for the neighborhood kids. Naruto had started to learn piano from his mother since he was a child, and he had become quite good with it. Yuki-chan is an elementary school student who loves to watch TV and junk food, and likes drinking soda a little too much. Rias giggled at the mention of the little girl. Yuki-chan is just the cutest girl. Naruto smiled and nodded. She's taken a real liking to you, and would often ask me about you at home. Really? Asked the beauty surprised. What do you tell her about me? The blonde chuckled and shook his head. Not much, since I don't know much about you in the first place. Rias smiled before she rested her head on Naruto's shoulder, making him blush a little. Well, my father is the head of the Gremory family, and my mother married into our family from the Biel family, another high-class devil family of the underworld. Naruto nodded as his master spoke, the need of his future promotions becoming much more apparent to him. I have an older brother. And he is the demon lord of the underworld, Seer's ex Lucifer. Demon lord? Cried Naruto in shock as Rias giggled at his reaction. He's the one who governs the entire underworld? Rias smiled and nodded against his shoulder. Yes. Oni-sama is very powerful, and is the leader of the 4 Satans of the underworld. So you are like the princess of the underworld? Asked Naruto in awe. The beauty smiled and shrugged. Pretty much. Naruto chuckled to himself with a grin on his face. Well, I'm the knight of a princess. That sounds nice. Rias giggled and wrapped her arms around Naruto's own. Yep. You are my handsome knight, muttered the girl with her eyes closed. And that is pretty much who Rias Gremory is. The blonde smiled at the affection shown by Rias and lightly rested his head against her own. But I also know that you are a girl who likes strawberry jam way too much, said Naruto with a smile as he recalled Rias having toast at his home. Someone who has never really had cereal before, someone who loves apple juice, and someone who always ties her right shoe laces before she even puts on the other shoe. Naruto looked down to see a surprised look on his master's face. This someone is Rias Senpai, my senior and a regular girl who goes to the same school as me, and not the demonic princess of the underworld. Rias looked up at Naruto with a small smile on her face. You know. You are the first person to ever see me as me, and not as Rias Gremory. Well, you are Rias Gremory, my master, but you are also a person who I value as a friend, and I want to get to know the real you, said Naruto with a smile on his face. I know there is much more to you than being the president of our club, and the daughter of the largest devil family of the underworld. Rias blushed as she leaned up to Naruto's cheek. Thank you, Naruto, whispered the girl as she gently kissed his cheek. Naruto blushed as a hand absent-mindedly reached up to touch his cheek. Why, you're welcome. Maybe I should sleep more at your place so you can learn more about me? Whispered Rias with a sexy tone close to Naruto's ear. Would you mind if I did that? The blonde blushed even harder than before, and shook his head. Of course I don't mind. Feel free to come over anytime, bucko. The beauty held onto Naruto's chin lightly and titled his face to face her. When we are alone, call me Rias, okay? Naruto nodded with his lips dangerously close to his master's. Okay, Rias. After another half hour of comfortable conversation on the bus, the two devils made it to their intended destination, and got off the bus with smiles on their faces. Naruto was glad that he got the chance to visit the southern area of town ahead of schedule, and hoped that he had enough supplies with him to tend to the people. Rias' arms remained wrapped around Naruto's own as they walked to the homeless shelter near the edge of town, and she was looking quite happy with a smile on her face. Rias had taken a huge liking to her new knight, and she looked forward to spending more time with him. The beauty had never met anyone like Naruto before, someone who was so selfless and righteous, someone who cared so much about others, and someone who saw past her external identity as the Gremory heiress and acknowledged her existence as Rias. She never thought that she would run into such a great man by chance and would revive him as her knight. Rias was very happy to finally have someone like Naruto in her life. Ah! Cried a sudden voice, a girl. Naruto looked over to see a girl lying on the ground after tripping on something. Are you alright? Asked the blonde as he walked over to help the girl up. Yes. Thank you, replied the girl with a polite and soft voice. The girl had long blonde hair and green eyes, and was quite cute in Naruto's opinion. She was dressed in a nun's clothes, which was odd considering her young age. Rias walked over to the scene with a smile on her face and looked down at the girl. The red-haired beauty saw no malice in the girl's eyes, but felt some sort of power residing inside her, and she finally noticed her traveling bags to the side of the road. Are you a tourist? Asked Rias as she picked up the fallen bag from the ground and handed it back to the girl. The blonde girl smiled and nervously poked her fingers together. Can you please help me? I got lost. The end. Thank you for watching, guys.